So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview, sponsored by the audiobook edition of Will Eisner, A Spirited Life, now available on iTunes and Audible.com, and recorded live on blogtalkradio.com from the new media and American League Baseball capital of the world, St. Petersburg. I have a particular weakness for men and women with stories of dates gone horribly wrong. And I think I'm already on record as having a general weakness for all kinds of women. Now, add that to the fact that I frequently like to help new authors, and how could I say no to Elizabeth Fournier, who has written the ticklish new book, All Men Are Cremated Equally, My 77 Blind Dates. I can't even say that with a straight face. Now, besides amusing us with psychosocial encounters, Elizabeth brings an extra dimension to her story thanks to her vocation. She's a mortician. She's also the voice of the autopsy exhibit in the forensic wing at the United States National Museum of Medicine. Oh, and did I mention she lives in a boring little town? She lives in Boring, Oregon. And because of that, she's become a reality TV star on MySpace, where she's known as the Green Reaper. More about that later. Oh, and here's a bit of a spoiler alert, so some of you may want to close your ears. There's a happy ending to her book. Elizabeth, welcome to Mr. Media.
I've never been described as ticklish before. I love it.
Now you're making me laugh again. Okay. Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
And sure. And Elizabeth, help me. I don't know where to start. Dating stiffs or working with them? Ladies' choice.
Well, working is much more quiet, no feedback, back talk. It's a good thing.
All right. Let's start there. How did you become a mortician?
The path here was kind of winding and odd, but I finally made my way. I think I really wanted to do this since childhood. I really did. I found as I played in the sandbox, I would always have the lineup of the cars, and they would always be heading to the little grave that I dug in the sand, and I found that the more cars in line, the bigger that it was, more impressive for all the rest of my dolls. It was kind of a fun thing.
Okay. All right. And is a sense of humor unusual or more common than people would think in your line of work?
I would say common. There are some wonderful people in my line of work. Of course, what we hear about in the media, Mr. Media, is the bad things. We hear about the things that are corrupt and unjust, but there's really kind people. Most people drawn to this vocation have had somebody close to them pass away and therefore really understand what's needed in that time for somebody in their life.
Now, have you always done this? I saw the story of how you got a job very young as the night keeper, I guess, at a funeral home. Mm-hmm. Was that your first big job?
Oh, well, I suppose so. That was my first foray into the funeral industry, and that was a job right outside of college. So I think by most standards, yeah, that would be kind of the door opening and the first full thing.
And to kind of start segueing into your book, have men found that either a intimidating vocation or frightening, or do they not know how to deal with it?
I found with anybody in general that you meet, it stops them in their tracks. It becomes this huge topic of conversation. When it comes to dating, I think most men had a hard time maybe wanting to meet me. Of course, mind you, in my book, I did have blind dates over 1 year, and that was always brought to the forefront by our matchmaker because it was extremely important to me that this person knew of this before they arrived because they really had to be able to just ultimately be cool with it.
And one more question about the work as a mortician. Are there still more men than women? Is it still unusual to find women in this business?
Yeah, it's very unusual to find women. It's very unusual to find younger women. It's very unusual to find attractive women. It's women who own their own funeral home. Things like that are very odd. A lot of times women have been in this as years had gone by because it was their husband's business and they just happened to be married to him, or maybe dad owned the place and they just grew up in it. For a woman to actually decide, I'm going to mortuary school, and decide that she's going to learn embalming and do her thing, yeah, definitely rare. When I go to the conventions, I would say there's probably 10% women in the room.
Well, it's very interesting. I could probably ask you a lot more questions about that, but I want to get to your book. So is it still true that a girl must kiss quite a few frogs to find a prince in this life?
What I have found in my journey, that I had several frogs, kissed none of them, but I went through several because I chose to set it up that way for myself. And what I mean by that was I don't advocate blind dating 77 men for anybody. I wrote the book to inspire women to know specifically what you want and know that he's out there, trust he is, and you don't have to actually go through the year-long slog through the underbelly of dating like I did. And
how did you come to be doing blind dates? Because that's a whole nother issue. I did one blind date, and we'll see if I get to that story or not. But why blind dates?
Blind dates were because I was sick and tired of having relationships that didn't go anywhere. I got to be 35, I was engaged, and I had broken up with him. And I kind of looked back at the situation and thought, wow, I've had a 1-year anniversary with about 10 people now. I'm a little tired of this. I want to get married. I want to get going. So when I broke up with this man, everybody came forward, and everybody had somebody they wanted to set me up with that they'd been holding on to, waiting, because they just knew the other shoe would fall, and I'd be kicking this person to the curb, and I'd be available. And
thank you to all my friends.
Yeah, isn't that ironic how you find out after the fact that people are very polite. If they're not really digging what you're doing, they kind of keep their head low and maybe don't show up and hang around as often, but ultimately people don't really come quite out and say, wow, this person is a complete bozo, get rid of him. And I guess I'm glad they didn't, because I had to go through the rough learning curve all on my own. So after I'd left him, I'd realized I don't want to have more dinner dates and just getting to know you sessions. And I was really burnt out. I didn't want to have another 1-year anniversary with another guy. So I told all these matchmakers, okay, here's the deal. If you want to throw your hat in the ring and you've got the perfect uncle or neighbor or podiatrist or whatever, here's what I'm looking for. So I wrote down a list of 10 non-superficial traits, and to some people I actually started emailing these out and said, okay, if you want to set me up with Billy or Johnny, here's the deal. Just make sure he matches this on the list. Main reason was I didn't want to get dressed on a Saturday night, go out to dinner, and have the traditional dating once again, the whole getting to know you and finding the things out, because I'd realized all my relationships had blown up because there were things specifically I didn't want in somebody, but those things were unveiled a few months or a year down the road. I wasn't really there, Mr. Media, to waste any more time. So blind dates came along. I decided to be set up.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
I'm sorry, my connection got dropped, so I apologize. I think you were talking about your list of.
I was lamenting.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, if you can hear me now, just to pick it up quickly, I just went ahead and decided to blind date because I wanted people to just set me up with people who they thought had all of the things that I was looking for on a list, so I didn't have to go through that myself. I really didn't want to go through a whole interview process. I really wanted my candidates screened, if you will, before I spent weeks and months and years getting to know them. I just was really burned out on the traditional course of dating.
And would you recommend this process to someone else who's frustrated?
No. Not at all.
So what you want to do here is you want to recommend that they read the book, but not follow your path.
Yeah, I want them to be able to laugh at what a silly goofball I was and enjoy my dates and realize that, wow, there's every type of person out there, and really, be able to laugh at my expense and also learn at my expense and really realize that if you do know what you want, the person's out there. The person who I now, spoiler alert, met and married through my blind dating has all of the aspects of what I was looking for. And if I didn't have that list, didn't stick to my guns, I would have had date number 2, date number 3. I had one date with all of these gentlemen, and no matter how cute they were or how much we laughed or how much I was lonely and available the next weekend, I did not go out with somebody again unless they had everything I was looking for and more, and I would not settle, and therefore I did not get into another dead-end relationship. I actually found the one.
It's funny. I was thinking back to this, and I wondered if this it sort of reminded me of watching the old Seinfeld show. Jerry had an excuse for pretty much every woman that he went out with. Oh, she's this, or she had this in her medicine cabinet, or she. Were you too picky?
No, and everything I chose, nothing about it was superficial. And when women read that, they will see it wasn't because of the color of their shirt, or I didn't think they were cute enough, or it was really nothing that specific. It was just more of a feel, a man who wasn't passionate about anything in his life, a man who decided that during the whole date he was going to text people or pick up his cell phone. Somebody who really didn't show an interest in who I was. They just really kind of wanted to move to the next physical level or what have you. So it was just really just a feeling, a sense, a vibe, knowing this person isn't the person I'm meant to be with, and really trusting myself and being true to myself versus just outright judging them.
Oh, my God. Are you saying that there were men that you went on blind dates with who all they were thinking about was taking you back to their place or your place?
Oh, sure.
Oh, my God. I'm shocked and disgusted. This is horrible.
Well, I think when you're having a date with somebody, there has to be that spark, that chemistry. You have to think about, I would like to kiss this person, because if you're just having a nice time, you might as well be having dinner with your brother. I mean, there's really that relation that needs to definitely happen. But there is the whole getting to know you process, and I do value somebody who actually cared about thoughts, feelings, morals, values, ethics before possibly other things were going to happen, or before they started considering me their girlfriend.
So none of them made it to a second date?
None of them made the second date. Now, there was a couple that were very close, but I just saw traits that they had which reminded me of a prior relationship, and I really, really, really was at a point where I wanted to get married, I wanted to have a child, and I made a vow to myself, I'm going to see this through, I'm going to make this work. And the nice thing about it was I had my father on my side cheering me along. When I had a couple dates and I would tell him about them, he'd say, this is really interesting. So I started calling him prior to the date, filling him in on what I was going to do, running down the thumbnail sketch, kind of their age and their name and where they lived or what have you. And then when I got back from the date, I would tell him, I'd email back kind of all the problems we had and the silly conversations and the reasons why they weren't going to springboard until the elusive next date. And after a while, he said, you really need to keep a journal. This is something. So, of course, after all this happened and played out, he said, Liz, this is great. This needs to be a book. So I really had my father, my best friend, on my side, and that really helped me stay true to who I was because I knew he was really rooting for me.
Now, should we consider you to be fairly brave to go out on 77 blind dates in this day and age? I mean, a lot of scary stuff out there.
I didn't think of myself as brave. I just considered myself some silly girl who puts on the same outfit, who goes to some of the same restaurants and, bores the waitstaff who's overhearing my same story. I just looked at myself as just kind of maybe possibly even wasting my time. But I think now that I hear about everything that goes on, one thing I have to say to women is one thing I did to be safe is if you get to know somebody, before you have the blind date, there needs to be a phone call. You need to get a sense of the person over the phone, not giving out your business number, but giving out maybe a cell number is a good thing. Just talk to the person, get a sense. Also, most of these men, I had found out, want a picture. Men are so visual. They wanted to see who they'd be meeting. You men, I tell you. So there was always an email exchange. I'd have to either lead them to my website or there'd be some sort of email exchange. But it was good. I got a sense of their writing. I got to ask them questions to get more personality and personal things. And I never met anybody at my home, at their home. I never got in their car. It was always in public. I always parked away from the place. It was always safe that way. And something I had going for me all along, which of course didn't make my father very nervous, was the fact that there was a mutual friend or somebody who knew both of us who set us up. So I knew that person had some sort of a background or a record. It wasn't just Johnny I met at the bus stop. It was somebody who actually knew somebody who knew me.
Now, what does it say about all your friends that you went through 77 of their friends and couldn't find the right person?
Yeah. I often wondered after a while, do these people even know me? Do they pay attention when I open my mouth? But what I realized, especially if you've been a long-term married person, you get very lost about how hard it is to meet up with somebody. My long-term married friends would say, oh, well, this guy is, your age, and he's single, and, oh, this would be a good match for you. So I found that's why the screening process is really important. If I just had a year of saying yes to everybody, I would have got everybody's discards, everybody's single neighbors. I really thought, hey, this has to be more specific to my ethics, my values, my morals, to what I'm looking for in a lifetime partner versus someone who's just going to take me out dancing or riding a bull or something. I just definitely needed more of something that we could possibly build a foundation on.
Now, share with us some of your favorite worst dates and then some of your favorite best blind dates. There had to be some good and bad at both.
Yeah. I'll definitely start with the good so nobody tunes me out too quick and thinks, this is just a year from hell. There actually were some great dates. There was somebody who was a contractor, and he needed to pour cement at his father's nursing home. So he called me back right away saying, oh, gosh, sorry, let's not have a date Sunday. I'm busy doing that. And I said, great, that'd be great. I'll come along and help you. And so it was a really great date where we just slogged through the cement and met people, and we all went out afterwards. And, that was a really fun date. His whole family was involved, and that was great. Another date, we walked around a nursery and just checked out plants. I had one at a downtown open bazaar in Portland. I had some really that were maybe more situationally really cool, where what I was doing at the time, walking through a rose garden or at some sort of a concert or something, was a really great venue versus the person. So I think creativity stands out really well. Doing something more than maybe seeing a movie. You can't really chat or necessarily. Most of the drinks that were at bars or at restaurants, pretty mundane, pretty non-creative. But the dates that were probably the worst for me were the guys who continually checked the cell phone and answered calls, not caring that actually I probably shaved my legs and washed my hair and picked out my outfit to get in the car and drive down the street and meet them. Things like that, just blatant disrespect of my time was hard. People who talked a lot incessantly about their ex-girlfriends or wives, that was a little bit hard to stomach. And, of course, I had the colorful people, the people who there was one guy who only spoke in movie quotes. That's all that came out of his mouth. Another guy who loved Harry Potter so much, he actually imitated all the characters through the date. There was the guy who just hated women, so he had to hear about how women were such jerks, on and on. So, some were actually kind of milquetoast. They were there. We chatted about their favorite shows. We chatted about our work life, and an hour later, we went our separate ways. Yeah, so I really had the run of the mill. Definitely some really kooky, laugh-out-loud screamers, and then there were just some where I thought, how did this person get themselves out of the house and get dressed and get there? And why the hell are my friends setting me up with some of these people? But ultimately, everybody I met, I learned something from. Everybody I met, I'm glad I met them. So I have to say that everybody out there has some quality about them that I really appreciated getting to learn.
Was there a single worst blind date?
There was a guy who assumed I was lesbian because I wasn't interested in him, and he was texting this to his friend the whole time. And he also just was staring at women, and he just was ultimately bad energy. As soon as I walked in the door, I thought, ugh. And not so much what he was wearing or what he looked like, but he just harnessed this aura of just hatred and just ugh. And that's kind of how it felt sitting across from him. It was just very uncomfortable, and it really brought me down. And after I left his presence, I just felt really kind of down in the dumps for a while and thinking, why am I doing this to myself? So, yeah, that was a great date.
I didn't have to get very far in the book before I knew I wanted to have you on the show because I read about the guy who was the gearhead, or thought he was.
Yeah.
And that was laugh out loud funny. Can you tell folks about the guy who seemed to think girls knew nothing about the cars and motors?
Yeah, that was Rod the mechanic. And something about my book as well. I changed the names to protect the rejected, probably also to protect myself from any sort of lawsuit too. But Rod the mechanic, he was another setup. He showed up in his Carhartt work overall uniform, and he felt that chicks don't know anything about cars, and we prattled on about our favorites and all of our things and what have you, and ultimately kind of dug himself into a bit of a corner. But yeah, he's another character. There was the self-righteous mechanic who really couldn't be bothered, and so they all definitely had their strong suits and what have you. And I guess, it's funny. I didn't do Rod or that date any justice the way I just spoke about it. But when I do read that to myself, I laugh out loud, think, that's funny. So it's probably more of a matter of the description, definitely.
And have you encountered any of these guys subsequently, since they were, mutual acquaintances?
Mr. Media, great question. No, I've not seen any of them or heard from any of them ever again, which I've been very surprised about. A lot of times when I'm doing book readings or I'm out publicly someplace, I'm always kind of expecting that person to be in the back kind of waving to me, yeah, I'm date 66 back here or something, or somebody asking a question and embarrassing the heck out of me or something, but that's never happened. The only thing that I have done or been kind of close to with that is I did email the fiancé who I had broken up with. He is mentioned in the beginning of the book and somewhat throughout the book, and it's not a very flattering portrayal of him, but then again, he wasn't a very flattering portrayal of himself. So I did actually find him out of the blue and emailed him, just letting him know, hey, I did publish this book. You're not mentioned by name. This can't hurt you, professionally or whatever, but just so you know you're in this, because I always kind of had that sneaking suspicion he might show up someplace and really embarrass me, but no such luck.
Gosh, I can only remember one blind date in my life, and it's been a long time. It was back in college, and I had an aunt in Brooklyn who had never expressed any interest in my social life or much of anything else, and then suddenly she calls me up and she says, I know a wonderful girl for you. She was my neighbor here, and I went to the University of Florida. She says she's attending the University of Florida just like you are. She's a lovely girl. She's so sweet, and she'd like to meet you. And I was like, well, I was not having a wonderful social life in college. And I thought, okay, what the hell? So I went to meet her, and I was just, I'm not a tall guy. I'm about 5'4". I'd say she was about 4'7", 4'8", and she was very sweet. But I just felt very uncomfortable. I felt like I was out with a child. I don't know how else to put it. And I think we went out one more time after that, and then what happened was when I took her home, I took her back, I think, to an apartment at that time. And she said, well, come on in. We can have a coffee or something. Okay. She said, excuse me for a minute. I want to put on something more comfortable. And I thought, well, sure, you got all dressed up for a date and you're back home. Well, she came out in a negligee, and I said, I got to go. I'm sorry. I had already decided this wasn't going to work for me. And even on dates with women that I had been with for a while, no one had ever pulled that right out of a movie. And I just thought, oh, God, this is not going to work. That just was just too. It was like something that would happen to like your parents, that kind of line.
Yeah, so, I think the red flag was originally the description. I've got a girl for you. That's what I think always when I had the over-exuberant, oh, my gosh, this person's a dreamboat. I thought, you got to go running and screaming because this is somebody who has not been out in quite a while. You're supposed to be that date who gets them back out there. And as much as I am open to people and being a part of their lives and what have you, I was on a mission. I had something I was doing. If I was going to befriend somebody and go out for a coffee or for a beer, great. I want to know that up front. If I'm supposed to be there just to be their social life and kind of show them that, hey, dating isn't so bad, again, that's great. But I, as a woman, don't want to get excited about them and Google them and match my first name with their last name and, all that stupid junk women really do if it was going to be somebody in that case. I had a couple dates, 2 men actually, who were gay, and I had not found out until after the date that they were homosexual, and both of them had the same thing. Well, for business reasons, I really should be seen out with women, and, I really think that I should. I was just thought, well, what the heck? Someone talked you up greatly. I thought I would go just to see if I'd be attracted to you because I thought maybe I should be doing this, and that was really hard for me. And I told them both, if you were honest about it and said, hey, this is my deal, then great, I would have had no problem. But I'm having an expectation that you might be the father of my child, and when you're not paying any attention to me and you're not even, showing any interest or attraction, it's really hard, and this, isn't fair to take my Saturday night. You're becoming a real cog in the spoke here if you're taking my Saturday night up for this. That's not fair.
Now, any of these guys that you wound up wishing you had met them professionally?
No, but a couple of them, I'd say probably 15 of them, I set up with other people. They were fine individuals. They just weren't for me. Most of these guys were fine. They either had quirks I didn't like, or a lot of them had maybe values I didn't care for. But again, that has nothing to do with they're a bad citizen. It just they weren't for me. And some of them I'd set up. One person actually dated somebody for about 6 months, but no marriage proposals out of it. But nonetheless, it was really neat to pay it forward.
Well, let's kind of wind up and talk about Elizabeth Fournier, the reality TV star. Folks, if you want to check this out, go to myspace.com/boring BORING versus VS normal. So boring versus normal. And Elizabeth, tell folks what this is all about.
One day I heard that there was an audition in the Boring Grange, and they were going to have an online film. And being the actor, colorful, creative type person I was, I headed on down with my green cowboy boots, and they chose 5 of us. And the deal is Toshiba is having a new online kind of cutting-edge advertising campaign. They're pitting Boring, Oregon against Normal, Illinois, and they chose 5 of us from each silly named town. And they followed us like a reality series. For the month of June and July, I had this camera crew from L.A. following me all over the place, whatever I was doing. And all of us were chosen because of we do something in town which technically isn't normal, isn't boring, and we're going to be using our Toshiba technology to make it exciting. So I'm known as the Green Reaper, which means that I'm very into green burials and environmental burials. And the green burial, just a little quick synopsis here, means burying people without chemicals or metal and what have you. And it's just very environmental, and it also can be with cremation. And I'm on the West Coast. I'm in Oregon. We're very just environmentally prone people here, and the green movement has really taken off. So that's kind of my calling here in the Portland area. So they chose me. So they watched me do a green burial. They watched me bury a tree where my child's placenta is, and they followed me all over. So we have a reality series online at the MySpace site that you mentioned, and for 6 weeks people can watch these videos that come on weekly. They can choose which town they think is rocking right along, and ultimately which town wins, that town's school system gets $15,000 worth of new Toshiba laptops. And I got to tell you, Normal, Illinois, they have 3 universities. Out here in Boring, Oregon, our students use chalk and chalkboards. No kidding.
So I think we want to encourage people to get on myspace.com and vote for Boring.
Our kids really need it. Yeah, they really need it.
All right. Well, last question. What's changed your life more, the book or the reality series?
The book has changed, and the reason why is women from all over the place have emailed me and have asked me questions and have come to me for advice and have said, hey, I had this date. Mine was similar. I read this, and you seem to be someone who would be my friend. Answer this question for me. And I've made some wonderful friendships. And it's been an amazing, amazing thing that women have opened up and have just said, I need some help with this, and I'm too embarrassed to ask my friends, can you help me? And I've got to say it's been so touching that people have said, by reading this book, I feel like I know you, and if you lived in my town, I'd want to be friends with you. That's an amazing, wonderful statement. Wonderful.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, folks, listen, you can find Elizabeth Fournier's book, All Men Are Cremated. I knew I was going to do that. All Men Are Cremated Equal, My 77 Blind Dates, at her own site. That's elizabethfournier.com, or at mrmedia.com, or at amazon.com. And don't forget to vote for Elizabeth and her neighbors in Normal, Oregon, in their titanic Toshiba battle with the denizens of Normal, Illinois, at myspace.com/boring versus normal. And Elizabeth, it was a lot of fun, and thanks so much for joining us on Mr. Media today.
Thank you, Mr. Media.
Good luck to you.
Thank you. You as well.
You too. And folks, for more interviews with journalists and authors, you can surf over to our main website, www.mrmedia.com. That's where you can listen to my earlier conversations with A.J. Jacobs of Esquire, John Darnton of the New York Times, former Washington Post reporter Peter Carlson, 2009 Pulitzer Prize winner for features Lane DeGregory, Washington Post reporter Philip Sheenon, Writer's Digest publisher Jane Friedman, and many more. And please think about writing an online review of Mr. Media, casting a vote for Mr. Media, or marking Mr. Media as one of your favorites, whether you listen on Blog Talk Radio, TrueSlant, Digital Journal, Vox, Podcast Pickle, MediaFly, Blueberry, Zencast, or Odeo. And subscribe to Mr. Media on iTunes, and you'll never miss a show. Just search Mr. Media Interviews from within iTunes and subscribe for free. Or subscribe to Mr. Media's blog on the Amazon Kindle Reader. You can also listen with a piece of string and a tin can in many locations. If you've got an idea for a guest, email me directly at bob@andelman.com. That's ANDELMAN. You can also follow me on Facebook or on Twitter, www.twitter.com/Andelman. Thanks so much for joining us today. Always appreciate when you give up a little piece of your day and spend it with us. Thanks for listening, everybody.